Welcome to Identity Unboxed, where we provide mentorship and promote representation for Black professionals in the advancement of the Black community.
We are seeking guidance from exceptional Black leaders, scholars, and professionals with expertise in their respective fields.
We hope to foster a space that promotes authenticity, inclusivity, and restoration for our listeners while exploring the intersection of our personal and professional lives.
This project is a culmination of our lived experiences as young Black professionals to transform our life trajectories, to overcome adversity, and reach triumph.
Our intention is to inspire you on your path to discovering your purpose. Well, welcome, David. We are so grateful to have you on Season 3 of Identity Unboxed for a bonus episode on capturing the human condition through dance. Just a little bit of background about David for our audience. David Roussève is a choreographer, writer, director, performer, magna cum laude graduate of Princeton University, and a Guggenheim Fellow. He is known for his dynamic, socially conscious dance theater that uniquely blends contemporary dance, theater, and multimedia elements to create immersive and thought-provoking performances. His work draws inspiration from the stories of marginalized communities as it explores complex themes related to identity, social justice, and human connection. Roussève founded the dance theater company David Roussève Reality in 1988 in New York, and Reality has since toured throughout the U.S., Europe, Great Britain, and South America, including 3 commissions and 4 performance residencies at the Brooklyn Academy of Music's Next Wave Festival, and 2 commissions and 3 performance residencies at Jacob's Pillow. Roussève's most recent short film screened at 56 festivals in 11 countries and received 10 awards, including 4 for Best Film. Other awards include a Bessie Creative Capital Fellowship, 3 Horton Awards, Alpert Award in the Arts, and 7 consecutive NEA Fellowships. Roussève is a Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Choreography in the Department of World, Arts, and Culture's Dance at UCLA, where he has also served as Associate Dean, Acting Dean, and Interim Dean of the School of the Arts and Architecture. Can you take us back to your younger self and speak to how you identified your true passion for capturing and sharing the human condition through dance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so honored, and thanks for that great introduction. I think my work and the focus of the work is an amalgam of my deeper concerns about life and priorities. And I did grow up in Houston, Texas, the child of parents, both from my mother had Louisiana roots, and my father was born and raised in New Orleans. And my mother's family they were the quintessential have-nots. My grandmother, who shaped a lot of how I view the world, and certainly shaped my priorities around not only the arts, but social justice, was a quintessential have-not. She was a Creole woman from literally the bayous of Louisiana who immigrated to Houston, search of a better life, which meant scrubbing floors versus picking cotton. And when I was really young, I adored my grandmother. I would call her my guru around life, just absorbing all the lessons she had to give me about love and treating people with dignity and humanity. And I noticed really early on that because of class, as much as race, if not more, she was often treated with disdain and belittled. And I noticed even at like 4 years old that, people seem to think that they have the right to treat her that way because she's a have-not and is powerless. And I decided very early in life, it became one of my missions to try to make the world a better place, as kind of big arc and pretentious as that sounds. And so that was always important to me, to do something that contributed to a greater social good. And long story short, I started in the arts. My mother enrolled me in acting classes at about 6 years old, and I loved the arts right away. But because of the limited world that I had around the arts, I didn't understand all the myriad of amazing things that you could do through art making. I only knew that I wanted to be a triple threat on Broadway, like a Broadway star, which is still an amazing goal for those. I love and adore Broadway, but it wasn't, from what I knew about Broadway and simply purely entertaining people, that was never going to be enough. that I wanted to also use the arts to forward these dialogues about humanity, about the commonalities between us, and therefore about social justice. And I had never, ever even heard of Princeton, didn't know what an Ivy League school was, had never heard of a prep school. I kind of had in the back of my mind there's a place where parents send their kids for classes, and I thought it was horrendous. Like, why would your parents not want to raise you? But just all that to say, I was clueless. And Princeton sent me an application, asked me to apply, um, and I did. And the point of this story is I was in love with the arts all my life, wanted to somehow go into the arts, but could not reconcile wanting to make a deeper contribution to the world in which I live with being in the arts, which is kind of silly, but that's how small my world was. And at Princeton, everything just exploded before me. That was why the universe sent me that application in the first place. And I realized through dance and theater, and I was equally in dance and theater, that you can have any type of conversation that you want. And in fact, in my opinion, the arts, through allowing us to see ourselves in the lives of the other, is actually the perfect vehicle for conducting deeper conversations around creating an equal and just world. Yeah, so Princeton was responsible for exploding my whole perspective on the arts and making it possible to go into the arts, because they showed me, hey, you can do anything you want with the art, and including having these social justice conversations.
That's so amazing. And it's so cool to hear how once you got to Princeton, you actually saw like your opportunities appear before you. But I was hoping you'd be able to describe a little bit about just your passion of pursuing the arts and dance, especially, it sounds like are you a first generation college graduate then?
On my mother's side, I'm second. She
Okay.
was first gen. And on my father's side, which is part of the piece,
Yeah.
they've been free of slavery since the 1791. So they
Oh,
are
wow.
actually bizarrely and phenomenally educated.
Wow. That's cool.
Uh, one great uncle, my grandfather's brother, was the first person ever in the history of Harvard to
Hmm.
get a PhD in 4 years. He got a
Wow.
B. He got a BA in architecture from MIT 28 years
Crazy.
before Brown versus the Board of Education.
Wow. Oh,
Uh,
that's really phenomenal just to hear about like how your ancestry is like informed,
yeah.
who you are. But yeah, I was just going to ask like when you were at Princeton, did you ever feel pressured to like pursue a different path outside of the arts? Because I know sometimes for, black students, and if you are, coming from a low income background, you're worried about like I need to make a living for myself, and sometimes the arts can be a little bit precarious in that sense. So did you ever feel that pressure from like other folks on
Oh my
campus?
gosh. When did I not feel that pressure?
Okay.
It was
Yeah.
incredible. And actually, I understood it, but I was not a very empowered, secure, grounded child. So I was also incredibly intimidated because, just one story, when I went to my eye doctor, who I adored, he's African American. My parents were the first generation of Black doctors, lawyers, as well as domestics, and there was no shade around what your parents and grandparents did. But I loved this eye doctor, and of course, meaning really well. When I was graduating from Princeton and I told him I wanted to go into the arts, he was just floored. And I think disgusted wouldn't be too harsh of a word. And I got that constantly. And I remember him saying to me, you have the world at your feet and you don't even know it, or you won't even acknowledge it. For African American, do you know how much your parents struggled for you to be able to go to Princeton? And I got that over and over and over, um, just constant. And I actually appreciate the points, but one doesn't give one's life eventually, I realize, in order to satisfy other people. And I just felt my personal happiness was at stake. But the pressure was intense. Um, and I look a lot at my parents in this piece, and my mother. They were both phenomenal. My mother was a whirlwind of beautifully bossy, wonderfully aggressive, get everything life has possibly to offer you African American woman who grew up with zero opportunities. And so I would not say that she forced us into living her dreams, but she offered us very clearly, told us why. I never had the chance to go to acting school and I always wanted to. And I couldn't do it because I was black, because I lived in a segregated world. If you want to go, I will enroll you tomorrow. I never swam in a private swimming pool, never learned how to swim until I was in college. If you want to swim, I will enroll you in swimming classes and get rid of that stereotype that black folks can't swim. If you, so she was determined that her challenges in access, she would reverse for us. So all that to say, it did take some time. Actually, didn't take time. My mother was the one who was like, I really would like for you to go to law school. But you know what? I would probably do exactly what you're doing. Follow your dream, sweetie. Just go for it. So that really helped have one person who was like, screw them. Follow what you want to do with your heart.
I love that so much, and it's amazing to see how your family encouraged you to be yourself and to pursue your passions. I know that you mentioned your grandma was treated with disdain because of race and class, and you mentioned how your mother lacked opportunity because of obvious systemic barriers. And I was wondering, since that kind of sparked your interest in social justice, can you elaborate a little bit on how you've been able to infuse social justice into your art as you evolved? Because I know, like you said, the arts, it's a true mechanism to really express that creative expression through lived experience.
Yeah, that's really such an important question. And for me, the telling of stories and narratives, there's a lot of text in my work as well as movement. And the stories, I did a series of six full-length works, very beginning of my career. That's what put me on the map, about my Creole grandmother. And I realized that through the telling of the story of a cis woman who was the quintessential have-not, faced every type of abuse and oppression imaginable, but who's a survivor who also taught me, do not lose your capacity to love and be compassionate, who succeeded in life. I thought, what if I can tell her story and allow people who maybe have not experienced an African American plus Creole woman, from her identity perspective, nor her class. And theater is what allows us, through the telling of stories, to access something inside of us that is in common with the other. And I think that's incredibly important. And one long story that I'll turn into a short one. um, it early in my career, this would have been 1990 or 91. I was a member of ACT UP in New York, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, the biggest nonviolent, but up to the border of violence. We were completely nonviolent, but ACT UP took very large scale nonviolent civic disobedience, took that very seriously. And I remembered at that point, I had my first huge gig coming up at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. I was still sculpting the piece, and ACT UP took over Grand Central Station. And it was so empowering, but also disturbing. There were just thousands of activists screaming, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. And of course, the commuters were blocked. This was rush hour, were blocked from getting to their trains. Um, and I have to say, just to my left, there was about to be a horrible fist fight between an ACT UP member and a commuter. He was really upset. And you know what? How would I blame him for being upset? He just wanted to get home to his family. So I stand behind that, the same way that I stand behind nonviolent disobedience when it's appropriate to this day. Um, I had a moment when I looked at him and heard him spewing those just the foulest language, so angry. And I thought, what if he could understand that this is actually a very human story of grief? That we are literally, everyone I know was either infected with HIV/AIDS or dead. What if he could understand that? And I thought, that's my mission. I'll still keep screaming about social justice from the top of my lungs, but also take the risk to be vulnerable enough, open enough, empathetic enough to forward an agenda that truly attempts to allow people to see themselves in my stories. And I thought that is probably the greatest social justice step that I can take. Getting people to understand what it is like on a human, humane, emotional, and spiritual level, what it means to be queer or African American or HIV positive, or so many of my pieces were about and performed by women. So that became my agenda right there in the middle of that act of protest. And ever since then, I've been trying to redefine and hone in on that agenda.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I feel like it's so amazing that you were able to center humanity through your art and to share other perspectives for people like that who may not understand your lived experience. And I just feel like that pivots perfectly into our next question. You recently shared in an interview that you grappled with your sexuality early on, at one point being engaged to a woman in your early 20s before embracing your identity as a black member of the LGBTQ plus community. And we were wondering, for those struggling with embracing their authentic selves, what words of wisdom do you have, and how did you overcome societal pressures to conform?
Oh my gosh, Brad, that's such an amazing question. And that was probably the single greatest, most consequential moment of my life. And to complicate things, I was engaged to be married when I graduated from Princeton. We were together since junior year at Princeton, so 2 years, and then we were together 4 or 5 years after that, until I realized I really needed to explore my attraction to men. And what's complicated is I know everyone always says to me, "Oh, so you were in the closet and afraid to come out." No, I loved her with all my heart. She's amazing. She's still one of my best friends on the planet. I was the best, I say the maid of honor, but I was her one person representing her in her wedding. She came to my wedding a couple of years ago in Los Angeles to my new husband. Um, so it was all that to say, I learned so much from this person. They remain a really integral part of my life. And it was devastating to have to say, I need to explore just how attracted I am sensually, spiritually, sexually, in every way to men. So let's take a break. And then over that break, I realized, oh, I am definitely gay. Uh, so it broke my heart. Um, but the story has a happy ending because we're still like family to this day. And what ultimately happened that would force me to make such a change was, we all need to learn to listen to that voice within us. And something inside of me said, first of all, this would have been 1984. Uh, and I thought, I am on a dangerous path and had never been in therapy. At that point, therapy was completely taboo in the African American community and still is, unfortunately, in many ways. But I was the first one in my family to say, get your butt to therapy, because I could tell that if I followed this path, marrying this incredible person, having our 3 kids, becoming a corporate lawyer, oh my God, that is not who I am. And I could also tell, the reason I mentioned therapy, I thought, this is getting dangerous. And I don't know what dangerous means. I would never choose to leave the planet of my own accord, but I thought, you might eventually hurt yourself in some way, shape, or form. It's too much. You have to let go of everything and say, this is rock bottom. Go to therapy and figure out what you want. So it was actually, ironically, for my own survival that I came out of the closet, realizing I'm not someone who can live a lie. And if you do try to live your life in a compassionate way, there was zero possibility that I would lie to my fiance. And small tangent, we were touring a piece, working with gospel choirs throughout the country. It was my piece. And at that point, several choir members, I understand the social pressure. And a couple of choir directors were on the quote unquote down low. And I thought, oh, their spouses are in on it too. So fabulous, whatever works for the couple. And then I came to realize your spouse doesn't know in the age of AIDS that you're sleeping with men. So I knew never, ever would I loved my fiance way too much to do that. And so the choice was clear. If you want to continue to live and live a fulfilling life, you have to explore what this means.
That's so amazing to hear that you had that awakening, but you also had the integrity to be honest with yourself and to those that you love to really just embrace who you are and be proud of that identity. And I was hoping you'd be able to describe a little bit more about your time in New York because I know at one point you got into NYU law. You were kind of in that in between period where you're like, am I going to do the corporate law thing? I'm going to, have the kids and everything, which I think points to another kind of point about like how society has that messaging with us about like heteronormativity and like the corporate culture and like that's what we should aspire to like in the American dream, quote unquote. But yeah, I was just wondering if like you could talk about that time in New York and how the culture influenced you and like meeting other Black creatives and how that just inspired you to really like continue to go on that path of authenticity.
Yeah, that's really a great question. I moved to New York and I deferred. I applied to two law schools, Columbia and NYU, because I knew I wanted to stay in New York. I got into both and I deferred. So I had 3 years to figure it out. Um, and I started doing everything possible in the arts. A lot of commercial work. I made my living on soap operas for a couple of years. Was trying to auditioning for every Broadway show, getting far, but I couldn't carry a tune, which was the Achilles heel. And then I was also doing alternative theater and dance in the East Village at spaces like La Mama, um, founded by an amazing, glorious African American woman, unheard of during her day. And PS 122, all these seminal downtown alternative spaces. And I have to say, it was when I went to Toronto to work for a company called the Toronto Dance Theatre, which was a somewhat conservative Graham technique based company. And when I came back from Toronto, I discovered the downtown dance community, which was the alternative avant garde dance community. And there was such a sense of freedom there. I just thought, these people, 99% white, they don't care what you think about what they're doing. They don't care at all. Not my tea, but they don't even care if you understand what they're doing, which was, not my thing. But I was like, wow, what freedom to get into a studio. This is what I want to be doing. And you can watch, and I encourage you to come. I love that you're here. But if you don't get it, I'm doing my own thing. So I'm going to continue to do my own thing, whether you like it or not. And I thought, what freedom. I want some of that to redefine the form of dance, to explore new technical models for moving. I just thought that is sensational. You are inventing things that never existed. Um, Now, mind you, it was an incredibly Eurocentric culture and community, but Bill T. Jones, Jawale Solar from Urban Bushwomen, a choreographer named B.B. Miller. There were three or four African American choreographers, a half generation before me, who were really opening up the field. I think Bill T being the one who's best known. But Bill talks all the time about this was a 100% white community. And I came in and said, I want to talk about Black stuff. And so there were people before me, but it was quite a fight to say, uh, this is work by and for a Southern African American in my case, and you are welcome to come. I really hope to make it accessible to everyone, but it's really by and for the Black Southern community. And for me, that did have implications artistically because my amazing family came to the first piece I did, which was all about growing up Creole in Houston. And they said the magic words in not a great way, but thinking exactly what I needed to hear. We loved it, David, but we couldn't quite understand a thing about what you were doing. And I thought, oh, no, 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 no. If this work is by and for the African American community, then certainly the African American community that's not used to Eurocentric alternative dance should be able to understand the piece. Otherwise, it's just for the Eurocentric community. And so, right there from the beginning, in terms of social justice, in terms of keeping the work accessible for the people it was from and by, I decided that you don't have to dumb your work down to give people a couple of clues to what it's about. And narrative and storytelling, I'm committed to having that be 100% accessible. They are narrative stories that anyone can understand, often told out of sequence, but that's what provides the entree. I feel like if I can pull you in with my stories and have them be broad enough for you to walk into the piece with me, then the avant-garde dance, the beautiful digital imagery, but that's experimental. You'll maybe, if you're in the piece, you'll understand more about what those elements are playing.
That's amazing. I love that those experiences helped you find your identity, and it seems like you were always pretty confident in your blackness and connected to that part of your identity. And I was wondering if you could speak more to the intersectionality of being a black gay man. And also, you mentioned that, your grandma taught you a lot of lessons growing up. You loved her so dearly. And did her love make your experience exploring and coming out of the closet a little easier? Because I know a lot of down low men, a lot of them are scared about family rejection, there's religious implications and all that stuff. So how did your upbringing make you confident enough to, tell the person you loved, like, hey, I need to go explore?
Yeah, that's such a great question because it was still so devastating to. I was aware I was ending the life I currently had struggled to obtain in order to switch to a new life. And I was terrified around coming out uh, to my family. I was out in New York forever before I even took the step of coming out to my family, probably about 5 years. And um, there's still work to do on this front, but back in the 80s, the level of homophobia within the African American community was through the roof. And so you kind of felt like I am ostracized by everyone. I'm too black for the gay community. I'm too gay for the black community. Oh gosh, where do I fit in? And I just thought I'm terrified as a people pleaser, a lifelong people pleaser. I have to tell these people things that they will find disgusting. They'll be so disappointed in me. But when it's a matter of continuing to move forward in your life or not, that seemed like an easy choice. I wasn't even sure where it was going. I just knew it wasn't the path that I was on. It was doing damage to my soul, is the only way I can put it. Um, and my grandmother, I came out so late in life that she and I never talked about my being gay. She passed away, a couple of years after I came out to my family and was absolutely, I had spoken to everyone else, was going to speak to my grandparents, but wasn't living in Houston at the time. But I will say that my grandmother's phenomenal acceptance of all aspects of humanity, that absolutely helped me to come out. And there was one which set the tone for my life. One experience with my grandmother's family, the Arsenaults, who, like, mind you, I adore my mother's family, but they are from backwoods Louisiana. My grandmother had to drop out of the second grade to pick cotton. So when you say, was I first gen? My mother was first gen, but she was the first in her family to graduate from the second grade. So it was extreme. So these are real country people, and I love me some country people. So that's not the issue. But we had a cousin from Louisiana who was named Sir Lady Java, who was a seminal very well known trans person who single-handedly fought a battle in Los Angeles to legalize drag. Sir Lady Java died just this year. During her day, she was a huge star, actually in Hollywood, with Red Fox, Sammy Davis, Lena Horne was her bestie, um, and just this stunning woman, absolutely incredible. Well, back in, I must have been 5, so this would have been like 1965. No one knew anything about trans people. We didn't even know it was a thing. It was just like, huh? And so Java was on her way to Los Angeles to explore Hollywood. And she stayed with my grandparents on the first night of the trip. And she had so many suitcases with her. Just like I peeked around the corner and saw like Diana Ross had walked into the house. She had on a big white mink. Homegirl was like flawless and fierce. But when she left, I heard my grandmother and her sister, who had known Java as a boy, a very young boy. They grew up in the same community and they helped raise her. And I remember them sitting around the table making boudin, which is Creole blood sausage, the day after Java left. And this set the tone for me in life. I remember them saying, well, I don't know what happened to the pee-pee, because they were so adamant. I'm telling you, I saw the pee-pee. I washed the pee-pee. This boy had a pee-pee. And they were like, what happened to it? They just couldn't understand it. But here's the point. They never said Java wasn't a woman. In fact, they said, that's a beautiful woman. How did that happen? But they never disputed the fact that Java was a woman. They told Java, come back anytime, we love you, cousin. They totally supported her, even though they didn't understand. They supported her as family and as a beautiful woman who was on her way to stardom. And so I learned early on from my grandmother, you don't have to understand. You just probably don't need to question somebody else's path. Even when you understand the magic of a man becoming what is clearly a woman, that's mind-blowing. If you've never even thought that was a possibility. And still they said, that's our cousin, we love her, and she's stunning, she's beautiful, she's amazing. So that really told me from the earliest age, accept people for who they are, even if you don't get it, even if it's bizarre to you, you can acknowledge that's a beautiful, fine woman, as we used to say down south, and we are proud to have her as our cousin. So yeah, I learned lessons about acceptance from my grandmother that I carry with me to this day.
That's so remarkable. And it also speaks to, I think, like the importance of representation, like you being exposed to that person so early on. It just like also impacted you and how you treat people and how you interact with others that are different from you. And it probably also lended to your art being able to the human experience and bring people into your world because I think, our world becomes so much bigger when we start to speak to others that come from different backgrounds from where we're at. And it just like exposes us to so much more than we've known. And so I think that's so great that you share that. And also, especially at that time, like you said, in 1965, like no one had any idea about that. Even like you mentioned, being a gay man. So like to have someone who was a man before become a woman, it's like, what is going on? But it's so great to hear that curiosity was there within you and your family. I think that's so important. And it's great to pivot into our next question about your newest work, Becoming Daddy AF, which we're so excited to hear about. It's an intimate theatrical meditation on life's purpose and the very meaning of love. You embody the portrait of a man defying death, but somehow unable to unabashedly embrace life following the recent loss of your husband. Can you share about how you bridge history, legacy, and identity in this work and what you hope audiences gain from it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Thank you, Tiana. Yeah, right before I made Becoming Daddy AF, because I usually make large scale group pieces. In this day and age, I started my career 35 years ago as a soloist, so it's nice to be returning to the solo form. But it had evolved into working with my dance company and making these, some would say bloated, some would say large scale works with video and text and sound and tin dancers. Uh, and the last piece that I made was one of those large scale works in 2018-19, the last piece before becoming Daddy AF. And it was about the life, trying to excavate the very complicated truth buried in the life of the late great jazz composer Billy Strayhorn. To make a long story short, Strayhorn was Ellington's main collaborator. He wrote a very large part of the Strayhorn canon, including Lush Life, Take the A Train, on and on and on. He never got proper credit for his work. Some would say because Ellington was hogging all the credit. Some would say it was because he was gay, out and living with his partners, and he was smart enough to know it's a threat to my very life. If I have a bigger focus, he was out in Harlem in the 30s. Whoa, I cannot imagine. Whoa. And so, but I had just made this piece trying to excavate what is the truth of this man's life? He drank and smoked himself to death, and yet he always said, I'm an incredibly happy person, living my personal freedom. So that's complicated. But having made that piece, once we stopped, I suddenly became aware of the fact that I'm old. And I say that I truly have to say I would not want to be a day younger. If someone said we can take you back to 25 now, I love my students. The youth, that is the future, and they're doing a lot better than my generation, quite frankly. But I don't want to be young again. Oh my God, no. So when I say I was aware of being older, what I mean is not in a fearful way, but in a way that I was acknowledging I have much less time to exist on the planet than I have already lived. And I became really curious about, well, what is the meaning of life? What have these 65 years meant? Why am I not dead? 90% of my career generation is dead. African American men, 65 is way above the normal age that through violence or health, African American men usually live. So why am I still on the planet? And it really got me to thinking about the purpose of my own life and what are the deeper truths in my own life. And I thought, well, maybe I need to do a solo. And instead of looking at someone else's life, my grandmother's, Billy Strayhorn, on and on, what if I look at my own life again to say, what has been the purpose of my life? And I quickly came to realize that for me, the meaning of life had very much to do with, and very well might be the meaning of love. And the way that I could see excavating the truths of my life, I realized early on that I would have to look at my ancestral legacy because we are the amalgam of those that have come before us. Um, my psyche was shaped by my grandmother, my mother, and my father, but what's in my DNA and biologically, but also culturally and historically, those that came before me shaped the path for me. And so I knew I had to focus on my genealogy. One side that I traced 6 lines to the 14th century in Europe, and one side, my mother's, that 1865, slavery. The end of slavery is how far back we can go. You run up against that massive roadblock, and I thought, well, surely the compassion, the anger, the purpose that lies within me has to do with those two genealogies, one that's super short and one that's real long because of white freedom. Uh, and so I knew I had to look at my genealogy. I knew that this piece was somehow an attempt because if coming out in my 20s was a great moment for me, equally important would have been the death of my former husband, Connor, who died by suicide. We were divorced for about a year when he chose to leave the planet, but we had stayed together as a very close family, queer family. And so I knew that, and I was shocked at just how much all the subtext of the piece are related to trying to understand. I won't even say make sense of because that's impossible. Someone's choice to leave the planet. And so I knew that would inform the piece. And then my narratives about dealing with racism and sexism from Houston to present day, and lots of joy and the search for hope and dignity and spirituality informs the piece. It's a very funny piece, but also a very gritty piece. So it's an amalgam of all those different lines that help to explain the inner workings of my soul. And last but not least, in the piece, when I made the Strayhorn piece, I found this amazing quote from a jazz, I believe he was a saxophone player, who said, "Everyone wants to know what's at the core of Billy Strayhorn's soul. You don't even have to ask. He left us a blueprint to his soul in his music. Listen to that bittersweet, melodically stunning, gloriously beautiful, incredibly sad music, and you know who he was." So I thought, that's true. But I also have the legacy of 35 years of dance making and monologues and movement that tell a lot about who I am as a person and the dialogue on love that was always happening in the work. So last but not least, I also incorporate 4 excerpts from earlier pieces, some from as early as 1992, to try to portray something that lies deep within me.
That's so beautiful. I love how you really got in depth with that and did sort of your own digging into your own life and trying to find the meaning of who you are through your lived experiences, through understanding that the past informs the present, and that goes all the way back to understanding your ancestral lineage and where you came to be and how you are here today. And also drawing from other inspirations like other artists and family members, but realizing, hey, like I've gotten here because of my lineage and I've drawn so much inspiration from other people, but at this point in my life, I've accomplished so much. And I know that my purpose in life is love, and you express that love through art. And I know you mentioned losing your husband, Connor. And in a recent interview, you said nothing is more powerful than love. It can even transcend death. And in the podcast interview, 40 Plus Gay Men, Gay Talk, I was listening and you said he did come back to me twice just to tell me that he loved me. And I was wondering if you could share more about how that experience of death impacted your, how experiencing losing someone like that impacted your perception of death from a spiritual aspect. And also if you can speak on how your life with HIV is also impacted that, because like you said, you've lost a lot of people, a lot of men through health issues, a lot of black men struggle with that. So long story short, can you share how that experience of losing Connor kind of changed your perception of death and also informed your lived experience now?
Yeah, that's a really great question and so potent, and quite a statement on love. To make a long story short, when Connor and I got divorced, uh, 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 to make a long story short, for my own survival, I initiated the idea. Um, I won't go into detail, but made it clear I wasn't deserting him. We would stay together as family forever. Uh, uh, and in our I told the story in Becoming Dad AF that in our last couples therapy session, after 10 grueling years, um, I turned to him and uh, I have grown more and more present as time went on. I still don't consider myself to be the most incredibly present person in the world, but I was so proud because I turned to him, took a deep breath, and then from the depth of my heart said, Connor, I just want you to know that I love you with all my heart and I always will. And then I literally said, because he was even more repressed than me, but I said, Connor, and is there anything that you could tell me if you love me, for example? I literally thought, let me just spell it out. If you love me, can you just tell me in this moment? And he was so angry with me that he literally sat there and looked at me and did not utter a word. And my heart just broke as I thought, damn, I don't like this open, vulnerable thing as much as I thought I would, because you could get stomped on. Oh my gosh. If I had just kept it shallow, I wouldn't be in this much pain. So, and then I kept saying, there'll be a moment. Don't worry about it, David. There will be a moment, whether it's in 1 year, 5 years, or 20 years, where Connor will come to you and say, remember that time I didn't say I love you to you? I just want you to know how much I love you. I just knew it. And then he died. And uh, uh, yeah, and core to the piece, I won't give it all away, but core to the piece is a moment when he came back from death. And as a symbol, he used symbols. And I actually Googled it after this happened, because what else do you do when you have a mystic experience? You Google, what does it
You're
mean?
like, the spirits are coming back. I gotta look into
They're
this.
coming. Yeah. And I read that scent, smell, is the primary symbol that spirits use because they can't speak to you. And there was an event, not to give it all away, but that involved scent. That was Connor's way of coming back from death to tell me that he loved me. And uh, again, it just rocked my world, and it said everything that I needed to say about the importance of love. Love transcends even death. How kind of this man to come back and tell me that he loved me. Um, and I do want to say, for me, it was definitely a spiritual life after death experience. But I'm so comfortable because, as a side note, it's important to me personally to say I have zero investment in other people believing my beliefs. And I think it's also a beautiful metaphor. If audience members think, wow, what a gorgeous metaphor, or how wonderful that his psyche allowed him to have this dream, that works too. I think that's beautiful. That's our own beings taking care of ourselves. But I know it was Connor taking care of me in that moment. 100%. He made it clear, very clear. Um, and so that changed mostly how I felt about love, because I am a believer in existence after death. Um, Maybe not in a Judeo-Christian model, but I had other experiences with other people to know that there's something that continues once we cross over. But what it did cement into my mind is that love is the force, the most powerful force in the universe. Unfortunately, it seems to be the main thing we're lacking right now, but it pointed out to me the importance of love to get us through even the most horrible moments of grief. Uh, and I want to say I learned that from Connor's death. But Brad, you are absolutely correct that HIV also shaped my experience and perspective around death, because I was on a pathway to death at one point in 2007. And without going into detail, it was bizarre that I was infected with HIV way back. I know the who, what, when, where's, why's in 1991. Um, I even had a doctor laugh me out of the office, say, "Oh my God, you are so not HIV positive, but we'll do the test." And I was like, "I know I am, so this is really not good. You need to check yourself as a doctor." But then
Yeah, that's like
also,
medical racism, like
oh
on
my
display,
God,
literally.
oh my God,
That's so bad.
it was literally. And there were no African American doctors that I knew of. I looked, AIDS, thank God for my HIV doctors. But because the white male gay community was the one primarily being devastated, that's where the focus was at that point. So all the real specialists were white, and now there are, in fact, a lot of African American infectious disease doctors, which is amazing. But it was also bizarre because I was leading an incredibly healthy life between yoga, diet, everything that my own personal experience with HIV was that it would advance, and the medications were not until 2007 as effective. And so also seeing yourself march to death uh, changes your perspective on life. and how important it is to live. It makes you wonder again, why am I on the planet? Why am I being allowed to live? And I have to say that at that moment, also, which is a story that I tell in Becoming Daddy AF, Connor walked into my hospital room right after I had decided to die. You know what I discovered? If you are sick in the hospital and you decide to give up, because I could tell the only thing keeping me alive was what I got from my Arsenault grandfather. Uh, so much chutzpah, guts, and audacity to even say, F you, death, I'm going to live. And I just decided it's not worth it. And that spirit is what kept me alive. Western medicine was not working at that point. It just wasn't. Until I gave up. And I was overjoyed thinking, I will be dead, oh my gosh, a week at most. And then the door to the hospital room opened, and in walks Connor. Lord have mercy. With this beautiful vase of red roses. And like one thing about being a choreographer and a terrified human being, you learn to read behavior because you're trying to figure out who's safe and who's going to beat my butt. But Connor walked in and I knew exactly what had been happening. He was smiling way too big. It was forced. He had these huge bags under his bloodshot eyes. And I was like, oh my. He's been up all night worried about me dying and thinking through, let me get some beautiful roses, let me walk in smiling so he'll never know. And I knew in that moment, soon as I saw him, that there was zero possibility that I would let myself die. Because I had a reason to live now, and the reason was love. So love changed my life twice in relation to death and my perspective on death.
Yeah, that is just so beautiful how all those experiences came together to one show you that your purpose is love and that you wanted to live. You know, you had a life to live and you weren't going to let HIV stop you. You weren't going to let any of those outside circumstances stop you. And I just want to affirm your experience too about believing in something after death. I've also, been the same where I've had to come to terms with not everyone will believe my beliefs, but I truly do believe there is life after death. I've had times where I've said prayers and I've seen my grandparents in my dreams and they'll tell me, let that hurt go. They'll say different things and I'm like, there's no way, like this could not be a coincidence at this point because I'm asking and they're literally coming to me. And so I just think it's beautiful that through that lived experience and also through, having those metaphysical experiences, you've kind of come to terms with that, or there's more of a peace, I feel like, with you, huh? That, there is something after this and you don't have to necessarily fear death.
Exactly, that's so important. And it allows me to move forward with no fear around death. I'll get to see my mom, dad, grandparents, and Connor again. I would, I would never, ever, it's very clear, I would not choose to, right after Connor walked in that room, I thought, as long as there is love and there's love everywhere, you're gonna live. I would never choose to leave the planet of my own accord. Uh, but I'm not afraid for when that does happen. I would, as of now, I'd rather be alive than cross over. But I don't fear crossing over, nor do I fear aging. Although, health is a bitch. But you wake up in the morning and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm dancing too hard for a 65-year-old because I can barely walk. So there are some things with aging that are not the best, but I love the wisdom, the maturity, and the knowledge that you hopefully have accumulated from your cumulative years on the planet.
That's so profound. And it sounds like you just had like a really ethereal experience through all that you shared with the spiritual experiences you had, and also just being able to, like you mentioned, come to terms with love, that how it can feel like there's pain and there's joy in it. And there's just so much that like you were able to dissect through your art. and that you've been able to like redefine what love is for you. And so I think that is just so impactful that you share with folks. And just pivoting a little bit, going to one of our almost last questions. If you could identify one moment of adversity that you overcame throughout your career, what would that be and why is it salient? And I know you already spoke about your lived experience with HIV, which it's amazing that you're here. We're so grateful that, you know, you're able to hold on and that you had that support to be able to be here today and to do all that you do. But could you describe that moment of adversity that you had and why that stood out to you?
Yeah, I would say a moment of adversity professionally would be I'm also a filmmaker, and I create short films, dance films that have narrative but also movement. And I was working Sundance, the institute that sponsors the film festival. They do a series of feature film development workshops to support the creation of screenwriting and directing for people who are making a feature film. And they always pick one oddball from the performance world to come in and talk about making a feature film out of a performance work that they have. And to make a long story short, I went there once, twice actually, to talk about making the piece that I made about my grandmother into a feature film. It went so incredibly well. I had the backing of the director of the festival. I was planning to come back to the director's lab, and then my mentor slash biggest supporter died. And for various reasons, and what you realize is that sometimes a project just isn't meant to happen. It just didn't happen. And that's where it didn't happen. And it was heartbreaking because I even had, I'm laughing because this is so woo woo, but I even had a couple of psychics tell me, oh my gosh, do you have a feature film coming out? Ones who stopped me on the street.
And you're like, wait a
Oh my
second,
gosh.
they're wrong. What?
But this was, I was really believing it. And then when it didn't happen, it was just heartbreaking. And what I learned from that is, you know, it may still happen. I'm still in some conversations, although I'm not as wedded to the idea as I used to be. Um, and what I learned was there will be heartbreaks, and so in life, and I was less used to those heartbreaks in professionally because in the modern dance world things were going really well. But I learned how to pick up the pieces again and acknowledge I am just heartbroken. I used to talk to Connor about it all the time, but I have to move forward. There will be other things in my past. So I learned acceptance and also perseverance and how to pick up the pieces from that. I was just devastated when that didn't happen. I was so set on it. Um, yeah, so that would be just one thing that I learned from my career around how to move forward and a tough time that I somehow worked my way through.
That's so valuable for our audience to hear that sometimes those dreams you have, they may not pan out in the way that you anticipate, but there's still more to come for you and you may end up having that feature film. We're going to hold out hope because we'll definitely go and watch it if you do. But yeah, that's so amazing. And Brad, I'll go ahead and let you ask our last question because I know we're somehow almost to time, which this went so fast. But yeah, Brad, go ahead.
Thank you so much for that and everything you shared. I feel like your culmination of lived experiences through your struggles, your art, it just speaks to the person that you are. And I know it's going to be an inspiration to our audience. And one of the last things that we ask all of our guests is, what does Blackness mean to you? Because, you know, our Blackness is unique to us and our lived experience. And so we would love to hear what Blackness means to you and how you hold that identity core to your heart.
Yeah, oh boy, that's really important because we did say earlier how I grew up in a Black community and seemed very assured in my Blackness my whole life. But I would say that that was not true when I was growing up. And because, not even a dirty secret, everyone knows that Creole people can be really racist, meaning uh, from my ancestors' time, the closer you were to white, the better. They did use the N word. My grandparents, however, because they did not consider themselves the N word, But my grandparents evolved 360 degrees from growing up in the victim of racism from white people and learning to be racist towards your very own. Uh, but they had evolved 100% and were proudly black. And I have to say, when people started using the term vocabulary and semantics matter, as the point of this story, African American, I thought, oh, I was uncomfortable with it. And I thought, let that be a lesson. You need to say African American every time rather than black, because you should be prouder of your African roots. And I have to say, through the use, it transformed me. Every time I said I'm African American, it didn't even have to be aggressive. It was just, yeah, I'm African American. Fill it out on the form. It was an affirmation. And then every time I'd say it, I start to think about all that melanin and how proud I am and how I felt when I visited Senegal and Ghana. And it became an affirmation. And through that personal affirmation, I became very proud of my blackness. And I would say blackness is a cultural reference because uh, black encompasses every shade. You come to a family reunion, you'll see blue-eyed blonde-haired and wonderfully curly-haired, very dark-skinned cousins, all equal and equally beautiful. But what unites us is a commitment to our African Americanness. What unites us is a commitment to the betterment of humanity that stems from our commitment to the betterness of bettering the African American community. And what unites me with my Southern Black roots is joy, spirituality, a legacy of oppression now denied. And I will always live with that bittersweet. The agonies are the lowest of the low, and the joys are the highest of the high that are a part of the African American culture. So the African American ethos, as I define it, is actually what connects me to other Black people, more so than the color of skin.
I love that. That is so beautiful. And also, I think you really speak to how the struggle has contributed to our joy and like making that joy so much brighter. And that's why it's so important to acknowledge that African American experience to see all that we've come from, but how we continue to pursue liberation and justice, like you said. And I always find it fascinating. Each one of our guests has such a different take on this and coming from so many different backgrounds and experiences. Like for me, I'm biracial. I was raised by my white family primarily. And like I am still so for always pushing for the black community and our liberation and that just collective power of embracing blackness, and like to hear where you've come from in the deep south and like you have that same experience too. And so yeah, it's very like transformative just speaking to people about that, and just hearing it from your perspective too, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Great. Well, yeah, this has been fabulous. I did have one last question for you, and I'm sorry it's not our interview questions that we sent, but
Go
I was
for
going
it.
to
Yeah.
ask, you were in academia for like the majority of your career, and as a creative, did you ever feel that was restrictive for you? And if so, like, how did you break out of the box? Because I'm
Yeah,
a creative too.
yeah,
Yeah.
to make a long story short, when I was traveling for a professional gig in Los Angeles in 1996, UCLA approached me, the Department of World Arts and Cultures slash dance. It was called the Department of World Arts and Cultures then. And I had avoided academia, had no desire, in fact, was adamantly against
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
all things academia, because they often at that point were teaching 1950s modern dance in these really conservative Eurocentric departments. And I thought, where's an avant garde queer Black man going to fit in these tired ass dance departments?
You're like just very myopic view.
But when UCLA said, we threw out our dance department and we're looking for someone to help us redesign it, built around what are the tools that current progressive experimental artists might need to survive in a profoundly multicultural and global world. And so I thought that was so interesting as a mission. And so I took the job. To tell you how divorced I was from academia, I remember when I got the job, oh my God, the chair of the department goes, everyone is just thrilled you can join us, and great news, we want to bring you in with tenure. And I was
Oh,
like, oh
wow.
my God, that's
That's
amazing.
big.
I could tell from how the inflection that
Yeah.
this was a good thing, but I was like, what the hell is tenure?
What's tenure? No, that's so
I
funny.
had to go
Which is
look
like
it
really
up.
hard to get for people.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
totally.
that's
Um,
wild.
yeah, so that was my entree in academia, and
Cool.
I committed to it, and mostly committed to it to support other artists and mentor other
Mm-hmm.
artists. I was the acting dean of my school. The
Mm-hmm.
school was in shambles, had to be put back together. But I only did that to represent, and not even representing queers or African Americans, but representing artists.
Mm-hmm.
Academia is, in fact, thesis sentence here, academia is, in fact, the only place that if you work the system and
Mm-hmm.
you're mentored by someone who knows how to work the system, I always tell artists, call me before you negotiate that letter.
Yeah.
So I can just tell you what to ask for because I had no clue.
Right.
But if you can find those things, you can have health insurance,
Mm-hmm.
retirement benefits, a
Yeah.
steady paycheck, and if you're in a university that's a legacy supporting artists, an
Mm-hmm.
ability to stay engaged with the field and do your work. So I was all about, when I was there for that long, it wasn't just about me getting those things. It was about, what if other theater people, visual artists, and choreographers can also have that perspective. So in the end,
Cool.
academia was really great, but you have to work it and make sure
Yeah.
joining this big corporate system, you're getting what you need from it.
That's great. Yeah, and you have to advocate for yourself, but that's amazing that you open the doors for other creatives to see like this is possible. You can still create the art in the way that you want. You just may have to ask for a little bit more and find mentors. So that's why we wanted to talk to you because I was like, how did he, get into academia and stay there for so long and not feel like, oh my gosh, this is exhausting being in like the ivory tower literally is, an elitist kind of space too. So, yeah, thank you so much. This has been amazing talking to you. And we hope you have a great rest of your Monday. We don't have any other questions, but if there's any last words, you're welcome to say them.
Um, no, I would just say that I was struck with how fulfilled I am through speaking with you. It was really clear, and how much been able to do with the arts. Um, and I would say if I had a last comment, it would be that I truly believe that the arts and the humanities are the way, and actually the only way that we can save the world now. STEM has kept me alive. No,
Yeah.
I would not be alive if it weren't for STEM. But
Right.
STEM did not allow me to live an
Hmm.
inspired life. That's where the arts come in. No one's going to save us from our current political predicament, and it is a predicament,
Yeah.
except artists and humanitarians that are stressing the through lines that we all share. So yeah, I think the arts are how we save the world, and I'm trying to do my little bit to help.
I love it. I completely echo that. So thank you again so much, David. We'll be speaking to you hopefully soon. We try to stay in community with all of our guests, even though now our guest
Terrific.
pool has spanned across the country somehow. But yeah, we're going to find a time to meet you in person at some point, hopefully.
Fabulous. I look forward to
Yeah.
it. And thank you so much for today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for joining us.
All
Thank
right.
you, Brad. Thank you, Tiana.
Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
And we hope our listeners in LA or near that area can watch David's Los Angeles premiere of Becoming Daddy AF, which is October 17th to 18th, 2025, at UCLA's Center for the Art of Performance. You can also learn more about reality dance theater at davidroussève.com and follow him on Instagram at davidroussèvereality.
We deeply appreciate your support as we work to uplift the Black community and explore our unique experiences within the Black diaspora on Identity Unboxed.
Authenticity is your guide to cast an impact on the world that you will be proud of. Signing off with pride, Tiana.
And Brad.
Thank you so much.